I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I had a backpack and I had $2,000-$3,000 to my name, and I just lost my job. And I sort of went off on this journey where I climbed in the Himalayas, went to Tibetan monasteries, ended up in Spain, and ended up walking this pilgrimage in Spain called the Camino de Santiago, completely accidental. This is actually what I learned. So there's only, I think, a couple of fears that are valid. That's like if there's a burning inferno. I think outside of that, if it's fear, like inner fear about like how we may be perceived or what may happen or something negative happen, I actually think we've turned it upside down. I think that's actually a signal to go forward. You're dealing with personal fears, you're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, you know, people die doing these things, you know, blisters. Some people get so bad blisters, they stop. You know, but it's all a matter of step by step by step. It happens. Then all sorts of resolutions just happen. It's funny, when you let go, is when we let go, is when all things just start to happen and all the realizations come and just life just starts to work more.
Define let go. Use another phrase.
Forgiveness, for example, is a letting go, right? Saying yes to life and not fighting it, not resisting what's happening. I think that's a key theme in this book, and I've learned.
What does that mean, saying yes to life?
It's actually something that a monk told me years ago, and I've really learned that as a core theme in this book. I remember asking him, I was a bit of a wise ass, I think, but I really meant it. I was like, he just looks so calm and peaceful and so joyful. I was like, how do you find peace? Because his life was not easy. And I was like, how do you find peace? And he looked at me and goes, easy question, huh? And I'm like, you know, if I'm going to ask you a question, that's the question. He said, okay, I'll tell you. He said, I say yes. To all that happens, I say yes. That literally is the secret. Because I think so much of our pain it comes from resisting what's happening. It's not giving in and saying, yay, you know, like, okay, but it's like being in the moment, saying yes, and then coming from there, what do I want to do? That's a place of power.
Here we go. Kamal Ravikant, welcome back. You didn't even remember you were on my podcast 2 years ago. How could you forget?
I am horrified.
That pivotal experience in your life.
You launched me, James. I'm horrified.
You had written this excellent book that so many people have loved called Love Yourself. It's got 2,200 reviews on Amazon now. How does that make you feel?
It's
mostly positive.
It's
mostly
humbling, man. It's
reviews.
humbling. And you launched that book. You wrote a blog post about it. And all I did was hide underneath the table after it came out. And it just took off.
Well, what I want to say is we're going to talk about your new book. It's your first novel, Rebirth, but it's very autobiographical, and there's a lot of issues that could be useful to anybody, but people should read the book to get the full in-depth. But I want to mention about Love Yourself. What I really wanted to do with that book was steal it from you. So I remember you told me the story, and I called you up, and I was like, you should let me interview you, and I'll write it up, your story. And you were like, I think I'm going to write this as a book.
I was stalling you. I was terrified. There was no way. Because I was terrified of what people in Silicon Valley would think of me. You know,
Yeah.
because at that time, look, my company had blown up. I'd failed. I got so sick. And here I was talking about, look, I love myself and I got better. You know, and I changed my life around. And I remember telling you that story at the W Hotel when you came to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'll do a blog post. And then you said, I'll let you do a guest blog post. That's when I really got terrified. And then I did say to you, tell you what, I'll put it all together. And if you say I should publish it, I will. And so I worked really, really, really hard on it. Insanely hard. I, locked myself in an apartment, grew a beard for like a month, just morning till night, love yourself, working on it, then cutting it. And then I sent it to you, and I didn't hear from you for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And I was like, oh shit, he hates it. And it was just you were just swamped. And you're like, oh, I love this. You have to publish it. I'm writing a blog post on it. I was like, oh. So then I published it, and it changed my life. It actually changed my life.
It's a great book. I mean, we're going to talk about Rebirth because there's a lot of things in there that's fascinating, and Rebirth comes out January 3rd. This podcast will probably also come out January 3rd to coincide with that. But there was one thing about Love Yourself, other than the content itself, which is, of course, beautiful, and you've gotten a great response to it. But one thing that I thought about when looking at Love Yourself that was really interesting to me has nothing to do with the book itself, but has to do with the publishing industry, which is you self-published that. Obviously, it was a huge bestseller. I mean, to get 2,200 reviews, you had to have sold hundreds of thousands of copies of books. But how many pages is the book?
It's 8,000 words. So I would say in the paperback, probably like 40-something pages or 40 pages.
So a publisher
Would never publish
that.
Ever.
In the history of publishing, no publisher since Gutenberg would publish that book.
Unless it was Ben Franklin who did pamphlets.
Yeah, but he did pamphlets, and he self-published. He actually owned his own printing press. But what's interesting to me is that it was a realization to myself, a book doesn't have to be 250 pages, which is what a publisher basically requires, and specifically 250 pages because if it's too much, it gets more expensive to print, and it's too little, bookstores don't want it, or for whatever reason. So you showed me that, okay, anything goes. You can write a 10-page book. And put it on Amazon. You could write a 5,000-page book and put it on Amazon. I'm just going to see how many pages Rebirth is. Excuse me for a second. 230 pages.
Yeah.
So right near the 250-page mark. Okay, let's talk about Rebirth, your first novel, but also borderline autobiographical.
And
I mean, I've even spoken to your publisher, who's mostly a nonfiction publisher, but he liked the way you took your real experiences and brought out more truth in it by putting it in a fictional format. So this novel is sort of this fictional journey that you went on. Your main character is called Amit, but I keep thinking of him as Kamal. I keep picturing you in the thing, and I always wonder if you met all these amazing characters in your real life. But describe the book a little bit.
Well, the book's actually based on my life in the sense that when I was in my 20s, mid-20s, and my dad died, and I wasn't close to him.
Why weren't you close to him?
My parents were divorced when I was a kid. My mom raised my brother and I never saw him, but I was with him the night he died.
Can I ask? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
I always interrupt. And so you never saw him. Did he live like across the street, or did he live in another state? Or
no, he lived in the same city, but he was actually it wasn't a good parting, and he was he was a troubled, abusive man. Which is my mom left him and took my brother and I, and it was a very hard time. We had no money. My mom raised my brother and I on nothing, like minimum wage.
Where did she work?
We were in Jamaica, Queens, 10 locks on her door. She worked, I think, in Bronx or Brooklyn. She used to commute every day, like several hours a day.
And he wouldn't help at all?
No.
What was he doing?
I don't know. He was a troubled man. And
can I ask? I'm just really curious. I'm sorry if it brings, because I know you don't really mention it in the book, but you just allude to it. In what do you mean he was troubled?
He was abusive,
How?
physically, emotionally.
Like, would he hit you? Would he hit your mom?
Both. Yeah. I have a bunch of memories of that. And it's actually, which is why when I had a chance to reconnect with him, I chose not to as I was growing up because I carried that anger, those memories as a kid. And yet when I found out he had cancer and he was dying, I reconnected with him. And I only
How did you reconnect with him?
I went to see him. And it was really hard. It was very, very hard to come. There's something about blood that you can't escape from, no matter what, right? And to face it. And then when he was in the last night in the hospital called me, and I flew out, and I was with him, and I made him a promise. He'd asked me for something, and I'd said I didn't want to do it. But when he was there dying, I said I would, which was he wanted me to take his ashes to the Ganges, which is a tradition of our ancestors.
So the Ganges, for anybody listening who might not know, is this river in India with very spiritual kind of connotations to it. How would you describe the Ganges?
A big river full of a lot of chanting people and bonfires and yet beauty. It flows in from the Himalayas. It's like the most sacred river in India. And I didn't know much about it, honestly. I just went and showed up there. And I had a backpack and I had $2,000-$3,000 to my name, and I just lost my job and
What
no
was
health
your job
insurance.
that you lost?
I was doing trauma research in emergency departments.
How do you lose a job like that? Don't they need people to do trauma research?
When you go away for a while. I took they just couldn't bear it. They didn't have they needed people in the emergency room every day, and I was going to go away for a few weeks. And once I was gone, I actually came home 8 months later. And I sort of went off on this journey where I climbed in the Himalayas, went to Tibetan monasteries, ended up in Spain, and ended up walking this pilgrimage in Spain called the Camino de Santiago, completely accidental.
So Camino de Santiago, that's like the path of St. James or something like that?
It is. It's an 11th century pilgrimage based on where they thought the tomb of St. James was. And millions of people have walked over the centuries. And it's fascinating because people still come. I think about 100,000 people a year come from all over the world to walk it. And most of them aren't Catholic. Most of them aren't religious. It's the whole thing about walking somewhere in the footprints of millions, kings to paupers who walked ahead of you for so many centuries. And you walk in those footsteps every day in a country that's not yours. And it's a journey of personal transformation. And I didn't know that. I was just doing it. And because I was just wandering.
Why did you decide? So you were in Tibet, and suddenly you said, "Okay, I'm going to go to Spain and go on this."
No. It was a long, convoluted thing. And then this is not a novel because novel is based on the experience, not the experience. But I was in Italy visiting a friend from college, and I was very drunk one night with a beautiful Italian woman, and she brought it up, and to impress her, I said I would. And next morning, I woke up all sober and thinking, "Huh?" Then I just had to look it up.
Doomed.
I'm like,
you promised the woman you've got to go on the
beautiful Italian with this beautiful green cat-like eyes.
By the way, it's a 550-mile pilgrimage that you have to walk.
Well, I didn't know it was that long. I thought it took a week at the time, and I was like, a week backpacking. And actually, I thought, it'd be good to get away in a country where I don't speak the language, just get away from everyone, just think.
So I want to really strongly underline how beautiful and rare a thing this is. So this is a pilgrimage that people would go on, a religious pilgrimage that you could kind of take away the religious aspect now because, like you say, not even Catholics go on it. It's many people go on it to find some icon at the end or goal at the end, ostensibly. But really what's happening is, right now, if I want to go to the Maldives and stay in an underwater hotel, I can book a plane, go out there, go snorkeling for a week, come back. It's almost like globalization has made experience too convenient, too commoditized. But you can't do that with a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage is the one thing in the world that's still, the one type of experience in the world that's still original. You have to go through it.
And it really is. I think
you can't just take a vacation to the Camino de Santiago.
You can take a plane to the end, but
there's no point.
There's no personal transformation,
right?
And
so personal transformation comes from the originality that the earth itself has given to us, as opposed to kind of the conveniences that modern technology has given to us.
It's the journey. The classic poem Ithaca. It's not Ithaca when you get there. It's the journey of who you become and getting to Ithaca. which is actually ultimately what a pilgrimage is. It's like boot camp for me. It was another pilgrimage I did when I was in Fort Benning, Georgia, when I was 18, right? It's like you daily be challenged every day, and by the end, when you graduate and you earn your infantry cord, you're a different person. You're a better version of yourself. You're a person who knows they can handle certain things in life you never thought. With this pilgrimage, it was even more interesting because all the kind of people who come to walk a pilgrimage are obviously different. They're not the average person, and the conversations you have.
Well, what do you mean? Like, are they? Because I can think of several things you might mean. On the one hand, they might be more troubled because they're trying to, everybody is sort of at some point at the beginning, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, my guess is the beginning of your journey, yes, you promised a woman, but also there must be some element where you were still troubled by, particularly the character in the book is troubled by his father's death in various ways that are, he doesn't even understand why. He's troubled also by his ex-girlfriend he had left behind. There are many things troubling him, but also there's this willingness to surrender, to seek that personal transformation. So often people are troubled, but they're not willing to surrender on the path of personal transformation. And that's what a pilgrimage, what other elements have to, am I wrong? Or what other elements have to happen
Ultimately,
in a pilgrimage?
I think it's a great encapsulation for, you want to take lessons, you want to learn life lessons in years and want to do it really quickly, go walk a pilgrimage. You get up every day, you have a backpack, and you walk west. And the adventures you have along the way. In this pilgrimage, you walk west. I walked for 37 days.
But not so quickly. It's, again, not like you could take a plane to the end of the thing and say, oh, I did it. You have to walk it.
Yeah, you have to. Some people bike it. Some people ride donkeys. Some
but
people,
you have to journey.
Yeah, probably. I'm sure someone's riding a unicycle. It's like probably now in a hoverboard or whatever, right? But still, you gotta make the journey.
I'm gonna do it on a Segway.
I bet you money someone's done it. But you gotta do the journey. And you walk through deserts, you walk through mountains, you walk through cities and villages where people still look like they're in the 16th century. And you're thinking, you're out under the stars. I slept in ruined castles and churches and wheat fields. And, I drank a lot of wine and I met people along the way. And I met some amazing, unbelievably wise people.
So tell me some of the characteristics of someone who begins a pilgrimage. Like among the people you met.
Among the people I met, if I was to use myself, I was troubled. I was trying to figure a lot of things out, what I wanted in life. And I was escaping from the memories of my father, coming to terms with his death, because there's a lot of unresolved issues. It's like when someone dies and you haven't had the conversations you wish you'd had, and so now you got to have the conversations with yourself. It's hard, and a pilgrimage in that sense was a great gift I gave to myself without realizing it, because I could have those conversations with people I met. People with people from Brazil, France, Spain, England, all over the world, Japan, with such various life experiences. And we shared with each other, you share with each other stories of your lives, and you can't help but grow.
What do you think were some of the other reasons other people were on this pilgrimage?
Some people are, escaping from their lives. Some people are at that place where they don't know what to do next. That's a great time to go on a pilgrimage. It's
so
actually,
you're feeling stuck or in a rut somehow, or maybe something bad happened, and it's a time to... It's almost kind of removes yourself from, like I said earlier, from the conveniences of modern society, so you can get back to this original state of the traveler, the journeyer.
Yeah, the journeyer, and
the wanderer.
It's also your journey intersecting with the journey of other pilgrims. That's what makes a pilgrimage. Not just walking alone all the time, and that's where the growth comes from. That's where the transformation comes from. For me, it was I met people from all over, some incredibly sane people, some incredibly insane people, but they all like their lessons. And you can't help but, you don't have shallow conversations when you're walking a pilgrimage. You just can't do it.
Do you think also because you've traveled to get there, and because you're on essentially a hard journey, like you have to walk 550 miles, do you think it helps you appreciate the conversations more as opposed to someone you just meet randomly, or your friend for coffee or whatever?
Yeah, because you're there for a reason. You didn't just accidentally, unlike myself, but even sort of, you didn't just actually just want to wake up and you're on a pilgrimage. You're there for a reason. So that's almost like, it's like when you're writing a story, there's a theme, and you stick to the theme writing the story. You sort of have a theme when you go. Either it's you're lost, or you're trying to figure things out, or you're saying, some people walk it to say goodbye. to things in their life, to people in their life they've lost.
It sounds like they're really saying goodbye to a chapter in their life.
Yeah.
And it's again, on the surface, it's about someone they lost, but it's about their experience, saying goodbye to that experience, their personal experience with that person.
Yeah, and you can't help but that happen. And what's interesting is when you do a journey like that, and like all things in life, what you set out for to do may not be what you need, but you get what you need. In these kind of journeys, it just happens because you're open, because you're actually physically moving forward, emotionally moving forward, spiritually moving forward. Like this novel is ultimately about forgiveness and saying yes to life. But the character doesn't know he needs that in the beginning.
Right, because he's thinking he's dealing with the fact that he needs to forgive his father, but he ends up, in a weird way, forgiving himself.
Which is ultimate forgiveness, right? He doesn't even know in the beginning he needs to forgive his father, but he has to go through this journey and grow through it to actually reach that space.
But I'm still intrigued by the idea of the journey and the wandering. Like, the fact that you don't know what you're going to find at the end, and yet you're willing to go there knowing that you don't know what you're going to find at the end, is a very interesting thing. It becomes not about what you're going to see, but how you're going to see the things along the way. It kind of sharpens, like right now, we wake up, we get in the car, we commute to work. Sometimes I'll drive or I'll be driven 20 minutes, half hour, and I won't even remember all the things along the way, because you do it the same thing every day. So your mind just goes away. But I imagine when you're on a pilgrimage like this, any pilgrimage really, it brings sharply into view all the things, the conversations, the things you see all along the way. Even though you're aiming for this one goal, the tomb of St. James, it's not about the tomb of St. James. It's about everything you see sharpens into view.
You're absolutely right, because everything is new. And everything is transient and fleeting, which is life anyway, but we just take it for granted. But there, everything is literally new, different language. Every site is new. Every village is new. One day you're walking on trails left by the Romans. Walking on cobblestone bridges built by the Romans. And the next day you're walking through like this crappy communist style like buildings with like steel bridges. Everything is just, you can't help but just take it in and be more present because it's all new.
So you met a lot of women, because there's Rose Angela,
Keep in mind, this is fiction.
Kat. This is fiction, but I'm sure there's based on real characters. And I won't give anything away on any of them.
No, you can.
No, but I think we'll preserve the sanctity of the novel, because I think there's so many issues, interesting issues around the novel. But like, what's the most meaningful? And I'm sure that all of your interactions were very meaningful. So describe some of the meaningful interactions you've had with these people.
Actually, the character that Kat is based on, she's real. And this woman was just amazing, who had lived such a life. She was an English nurse who had lived in Africa and became basically a de facto doctor in Africa, and took her kids, 3 kids and 3 sons and 1 adopted daughter, and just rode them across a Land Rover in Africa. Used to get pulled over by soldiers with machine guns, and then used to give them cigarettes to remind them that she was human, and then they would let her go. And then she worked in the film industry, was very well known as this nurse that just loved people. And I just met her randomly. We walked for a long time together, and she shared me the stories of her life. And they were just, those kind of people, right? Like, those are the kind of people that end up on a pilgrimage. You know what I mean? I don't think I met anyone who was just, not interesting. And ultimately, everyone's interesting. But it's almost like when you're in that journey, the more interesting parts of them come out.
But I wonder if it's like, there's a transformation that happens on the pilgrimage to a pilgrimage. So, no, you went through a lot on the way to the pilgrimage. Your father died, and that was very complicated. You went to India to do this ritualistic, like putting the ashes in the Ganges River. You went to Tibet. You went to Italy. And now you're ready to begin the pilgrimage. It's sort of like you're on a pre-pilgrimage.
Yeah, the accidental pilgrim. Yeah. Looking back, I think I did that whole trip for 8 months, something on $3,500 too, which in itself was a pilgrimage.
Because people actually associate time with money, right? There's a phrase, time is money. And so people think, well, I can't do a pilgrimage. It'll take me away from this and that and my responsibilities. But the reality is, sometimes you have to do it. You have to go through a sense of surrender, a sense personal discovery? Were you scared along the way at all?
Scared? No. I was fortunate I've been in the military, so those like traveling doesn't scare me. What
about
scares
scared
me
internally?
internally, yeah, like the things about what was facing me back home because I left everything behind. Everything was falling apart back home, and yet I had this feeling that I had to do it. Once I started, I couldn't stop, and I couldn't explain it why. But I've also learned, looking back in my life, that's where you got to go. If you have fear, like that kind of fear, but something is propelling you forward, that's a signal. That's like the closest you can get to true north in your compass.
So
right?
how can you? That reminds me of like Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. Like, how can you kind of lean? What's the technique for leaning into that fear? Because a lot of people have that. Like, I might be afraid to have a difficult conversation with somebody. I might be afraid to ask for a raise. I might be afraid to leave a job. There's lots of things people are afraid. I might be afraid to write a book.
Yeah.
How do you lean in? What's the technique for leaning into that fear?
That's a great question, and this is actually what I learned. So there's only, I think, a couple of fears that are valid. It's like if there's a burning inferno and you don't
Then
have
you
to pull
run.
anyone out, don't go in. I think outside of that, if it's fear, like inner fear about like how we may be perceived or what may happen or something negative happen, I actually think we've turned it upside down. I think that's actually a signal to go forward. What we do is, I don't know why, we actually use it as a signal to not cross that line. So I started to like actually look at that in my life. Like if it scares me, like that kind of scares me, I have to do it.
Well, you figure, I mean, there's almost like an evolutionary thing happening where you figure we have this fear left over. It's the same fear that, like, let's say reptiles fear. So if they see like an animal or even too much sunlight, so they're exposed, they're afraid and they run away. And we kind of have those same genes still in our reptilian brain, but now we live in a very complicated society, so most of those fears are irrational. So you should actually kind of move forward. It's a signal for moving forward as opposed to a lion's about to eat you.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's also connected to the heart. I think it's actually a signal. That's where the magic is. But you got to cross the line. You got to step up for life to show it to you. Like, look, like writing the book, Love Yourself, putting it out. I was terrified. I was
And
telling my friend.
did any of your fears come true? Did anyone say, what the heck is up with Kamal?
A couple of people, some people, but, they were drowned out by all the other people whose lives had changed.
Yeah.
And also, but ultimately who I became in the process of someone who conquered that, not even conquered the fear, just use it as a guide to go forward. And then you start to live that more in your life. I think it's a very practical way to actually look at things as well. It's like, if I'm afraid and it's not a burning fire, a physical burning fire with no puppies or kids in there I got to run in and save. If it's outside of that, that's actually saying go, that's where you go.
Okay, so let's say, and I know this is only peripherally related to your book, but also not. Let's say I'm in my cubicle. I'm hearing this guy who went on this beautiful pilgrimage and wrote a novel about it. And it sounds like something appealing to me, but I feel like I can't do it myself. What maybe small steps can one take to have kind of even a mini pilgrimage or inner pilgrimage?
Yeah, I think ultimately, if you were to boil it down, like I said, I think a pilgrimage is a journey of personal transformation. It's one great vehicle. It's a vehicle that's been around in human history since forever in so many cultures. Tibetans have their own, which is they're like bow and prostrate themselves for like hundreds of miles every step, then get up, bow, prostrate themselves. I mean, that's some serious pilgrimage.
Even Jesus had his 40 days in the desert.
Yeah.
You had your 37 days on the
I had my 13 and a half weeks in boot camp. I think, but outside of that, anything that causes us to first be challenged in some way, we got to face fears. And second is to go within. And that's a pilgrimage. I mean, you could go. It could be anything really. It's facing fears and going within. I mean, what would you do in your life for that?
I think for me, a lot of it might have to do with different types of creativity, or also like meeting people. And like for you, a big part of this pilgrimage was not just what you saw, but the people who you met. You met people. There's an otherness.
Yes.
To the people you met. They're not the people you went to school with. They're not the people you grew up with. They're not the people in your demographic. They're not the people you're used to. You met the other on this pilgrimage. And the other might be in the form of Loic, who traveled with you for quite a bit on the pilgrimage, or this Rose Angela, or a cat, or, these many people who you never would have encountered otherwise.
Yeah, and these people, are some of the most important factors in my personal transformation of my life. It's funny how that works, right? When you go out of your ordinary. So I think actually part of a pilgrimage is going out of your ordinary, out of your safe space, whatever that is. For a fighter pilot, flying a plane might be, but going to a bar where there's and talking to, I met some like really impressive baller soldiers, but like to go talk to a strange woman in a bar. These guys could storm any building with ISIS fighters, but go talk to one in a bar, and it's the hardest thing in the world. Ultimately, it's personal transformation. It's facing your fears in a consistent way.
What do you mean by consistent? Why do you emphasize that?
It's pilgrimage. You get up every day. You walk a particular direction. You have a path. It's consistent. You don't just walk one day, then fly back home, then come back a year later, walk another day. The transformation comes from consistency.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. the future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
So maybe for a person at home, it could be, kind of the equivalent of a morning pages, like journaling, or take some different route to work where you experience something. I don't know. It's an exercise worth thinking about. Like, what are the pilgrimages we can do in everyday life?
I mean, it's also like, it's interesting, all pilgrimages have their own rituals. There's some preordained, some that people make up along the way, right? So one of the things I try to do these days is I have rituals. Rituals I do in the morning, rituals I do at night. I usually fail at the one at night, but the ones in the morning is actually more important. At least, I don't know if it's more important, but it's the one I succeed at more. And that in itself, done consistently, improves the quality of my life.
Like, what are your morning rituals?
Well, I get up, I have my coffee, and I go sit by the couch by the window, and I do my Love Yourself meditation every day. And then I sit down and I do, I actually do a small version of the morning pages. 3 pages is too much for me. I'll write half a page. But it's not writing. It's just getting my thoughts out. It's getting my life experience of yesterday out onto the page into today. And it gives me almost like a record of my life lessons. And then sometimes I'll read a poem by Hafiz and try to think of a way I can make that poem my anchor for the day.
That's really interesting. What can you think of a line or two from a Hafiz poem?
One of my favorites is when I wish I could show you. No, when you're in loneliness, when you're lonely or in darkness, I wish I could show you the astonishing light of your own being. It's just the astonishing light of your own being. And so
how would you then take that line, and would you remind yourself of it?
Of the astonishing light of my own being during the day.
So if you're feeling like let's say a car splashes mud on your pants and you're feeling down, you try to remind yourself of that poem?
Actually, the irony is when I'm feeling down, I don't remember any of that. So that's why I make it a practice. You know, that's why consistency. I'll just like certain times in the day, if I'm drinking my coffee or if I'm just doing something, like before I came into the interview, you know, I was late. I took the train the wrong way I came in. But I kind of like...
What a fucked up move that was.
It really was, man. I'm amazed you're still talking to me. But I do that. Before I walk in, I'll just remind myself that. And it's a simple way of centering yourself. And it's done consistently done. These things do transform our inner selves.
You know, it's interesting. I just read a book recently, and I'm having a podcast in a few weeks with the author of it, so I'll save mentioning the book. But in her book, she says, if you do something, and she's like a brain scientist, if you do something 3 times a day for 6 weeks, then that will become a habit. Now, a lot of people have different rules about what becomes a habit in science, so I don't know if this is true or not, but it's just interesting that, like you, she doesn't say just do it when you're aware of being negative. She says actually have a proactive habit of being positive, and your proactive habit is remembering these poems and how it affects you.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a new thing I've been playing with. Another thing I want to do is actually start meditating on my death. You know, the whole samurai thing, because actually that's when you really start to appreciate life. And it's interesting at pilgrimages, you see a lot of symbolism of life and death, you know, because you pass, they're based around religious themes. And so it's funny, so this book has, you know, ultimately it's rebirth, but you can't go have rebirth without death, even personal rebirth, right? Which is something we've talked about before. It's like, you got to hit bottom. When we hit bottom is often when we really truly rise to our greatest self. It's like that becoming that phoenix that you know, and Gone with the Wind, as God is my witness, I will never go hungry again. Do you ever think she'll ever go hungry? No. She's hit bottom. She's made that inner choice. She's going to rise, right?
How do you think, so some people hit bottom, and a lot of people who are successful say, I hit bottom, and then I became a success after that. But I'm sure there's a lot of people out there we don't hear about who hit bottom and just keep going down. There really is no bottom. You can just keep going down.
No, actually, I have a line that the character says, if there's a bottom, then there's many levels, you know, and I've just discovered a new one. Right. I think there's different kinds of bottoms in our life, and each one, all don't have to propel us forward. We are human beings. By nature of human beings, that means we make mistakes. I don't think if you look at the word human and the Wikipedia, it says perfect, right? So... But it's when we actually, the ones that when we do hit, and bottom is a personal definition. You know, it could be a hangnail for someone, not me. But, you know, but realizing that going into the inner self, that I am going to get out of this, I'm going to be better. It's who you become. Once again, personal transformation. It's who you become, because that person, like you and I know people, and heck, that's you, who've made money, lost money, made money, lost money, and you're making money again. And it's because who you became in the process that you will always make money. Like my brother, you know, who's obviously, you know, is very successful in Silicon Valley, once said, you know, if somehow I just woke up on Mars one day, I just start building hotels on Mars. Like, you develop that mindset. But he's had bottoms. I've seen what he's gone through as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, you know, that's led to his success. I live with him during some of those. So like, you go through those, it's who you become, and then what you build out of that. You don't have to go build something great out of every bottom, right? We're human.
Right, like if you hit bottom, you don't have to necessarily go on a 550-mile walk.
It'll help.
But you could find, it would help, but you could find maybe some smaller pilgrimages in your life, to one-day pilgrimages somehow.
Yeah.
Just anything that's not a commoditized, convenient experience, I think could be transformed.
No online programs, no like coaching, no going to a seminar, just you, yourself, having an experience that's yourself.
That's a really interesting point, because, again, I think with the proliferation of not only self-help books, but Insta quotes, like Instagram photos with inspirational quotes, it's almost like the experience of self-help has become so convenient that it's not helpful anymore.
It's not. Like all those quotes on Instagram, like whose life is suddenly transformed because they read a quote on Instagram.
Right, and it seems like what I keep getting back to and what I keep thinking about is a pilgrimage is the original self-help. It's like, okay, you have a problem, you're scared, you're troubled, you're in a rut, whatever, you need to figure something out, start here. Start walking.
Step by step.
Yeah.
It's such a great metaphor for life, step by step. I remember once I was ready to give up, and this German guy from the Black Forest just said, it's just step by step.
Why were you ready to give up?
I was just tired. I was scared about where to go home to. I was almost out of money. I'm like, I barely have left for a plane ticket. When I go back, I'll be homeless. Like, well, he's like, listen, man. I'm like, and what am I going towards? This Santiago is so far. It's still like 300 miles. He's like, just step by step. You know, that's the secret of building a startup. That's the secret to raising a venture fund. That's the secret to anything is just step by step.
Writing a novel?
Oh my God, writing a novel word by word, right?
How long did it take you to write this novel?
I wrote the first draft in 1998.
1998. So
I wrote
16
and
years ago.
rewrote obsessively this novel from scratch over a decade, 8 drafts, and I sold this to Hachette last fall. And then I wrote the final draft this year. But, I'm so grateful it took that long because I would send it out, I would get rejections, and I would get depressed, and I would say, okay, I'm going to become a better writer to make this novel better. And then I would spend a year just teaching myself while building startups, reading Hemingway at night and obsessively just learning and rewrite from scratch, send it out again. The rejection letters got better and better over time until there were personal phone calls. And then I was building this company, and that fell apart. And then I fell apart, and you wrote a blog post, and Love Yourself took off. But Love Yourself exists because of all those rejections I got that made me become a better writer, that allowed me to write that simply, that allowed me to write an 8,000 word book. It's hard to write a small book, but every word matters. That's work.
Right.
That's craft.
Well, and even with this, I remember you had your biggest challenge towards the end was not the writing, but the rewriting. You had to take 30% of this book out.
One of the wisest things I've had happen for this novel was the editor, Mauro DePretta at Hachette. So I thought I was going to get like this amazing, like line by line, we're going to hold hands and do things together. And he just said, listen, man, I love this story. You got the spine. I want you to go and get rid of 70% of characters and cut at least 40%. You have 3 months. Go. And I remember walking around thinking, I'm going to give him his money back. And then I sat down and thought, okay, how am I going to do this? And writing itself became its own pilgrimage because I basically just gave everything. I disappeared. I gave everything in this book. And every day I would sit in front of my computer not knowing how to do it. But like 10 hours later, 11 hours later, I'd done something. So by like a month and a half, when I would sit down in front of my computer, I knew I'd be able to do something. And I just worked. And he was so right, so wise in not giving me line-by-line stuff because he knew that I had to figure out what the right characters, the right lessons. And that actually allowed me to take all these other life lessons that I've learned, since then, like about loving yourself, hitting bottom, saying yes to life, forgiveness, like so much. And I was able to layer them in to make this way better book than it ever could have been.
So let's talk about it. You're on the journey, and I imagine when you're in the middle of something like this, there must be some kind of almost loss of identity. You're no longer kind of the Kamal Ravikant
you become
that was
a pilgrimage,
working in the trauma thing. You're now this entity on a pilgrimage around people you've never been around before, in a place you've never been before, on a road going to something you've never heard of before. So what's happening as you start to rebuild after this loss of identity? Who are you meeting and what are you learning?
Ultimately you realize you just become another pilgrim, one of many who's existed under the stars and come and gone. And it's so freeing. It's so freeing. You let go of your personal drama and you're just another pilgrim making his way out west under the stars. It's like one of the most, it's like realizing I'm just another human being doing what humans do under the stars, and boom, I'm a firefly and I'm gone. It's just something really freeing about that. And that happens. I don't know. I don't think I can point to how to make it happen like, step 1, step 2. You got to go through your own inner journey or outer journey, which is a combination inner and outer, to get there. But it does happen. A pilgrimage, that happened for me. And that happens to this character who realizes I'm just, where it becomes, it's a humility that happens. And I think personal transformation also comes from an inner humility. That's where forgiveness comes from. Because otherwise, you can't be holding on to something if you're humble about, like a grudge. Humility comes from letting go, realizing your humanness, the people you're holding against their humanness.
Okay, but let me challenge that. So your father was abusive. Let's just say he hit you every day. I don't know the story. How do you ever get enough humility to forgive that?
Because, well, in walking the pilgrimage, the people I met and what they shared with me, and I realized ultimately he was a human being with his faults. And he did try in his own way. We create stories about everyone in our lives, right? We can take but there's certain points we take in our lives and we just create a story around it. One can always pick other threads and create an opposite story around it. Statistics, you can take the same data and really have completely different conclusion, right? So Ultimately, it was realizing his humanness and loving his humanness. And that's what actually where the forgiveness came from. But just, he was human, he was screwed up. He came from his own thing. And he did try in certain ways. I just didn't see those until he was dead, right? And it was sad to realize that after he died, because you miss that connection. But it does free you. I wish for people that they can do that before they lose a loved one. Like you've been through it. It's hard when you can't say to their face anymore. You can say to the stars, or you can say it on a journal, you can say it to them in your mind, but there's something that we miss out on saying, looking in the eyes and saying that. It's a gift to ourselves, ultimately. All these things that we do, they're a gift to ourselves more than they are to the other person.
It's true, or it's interesting about it that it's a gift to yourself. On the journey, was there a point you remember where suddenly you're like realizing this, the kind of humanness of your father, the other story of your father, and you wish you could have told him that?
Yeah. And here's a very interesting thing, and a thing that it actually happened. I was in a little church in a little mountaintop town called Osabrero. It's like a little tiny town in the middle of nowhere. It's like the highest point of the Camino, and there's a beautiful story behind it. And I was there lighting a candle, and that's when it really all hit me. And that's where the forgiveness happened. I remember that moment, right? And a year or two later, I was reading Paulo Coelho's A Pilgrimage. He walked the Camino de Santiago. In fact, if you read The Alchemist, the main character's name is Santiago. He wrote it after walking the Camino de Santiago. So The Pilgrimage, it's his nonfiction, and his climax, where he receives a sword from his teacher, happened in the same damn church in a mountaintop in Osabrero. I found out years later. I was like, what are the odds of that? It's like there's something special here that's happening here. Like my personal climax. So actually, I also make this character's main climax, like the forgiveness climax, happened in the same exact place. So that was a point. But I don't think, it's like a tipping point. You can't just take a plane and land there. You got to get there, work towards it, and do the work, and eventually it just tips. And that's where the tipping point happened.
And so it's almost like, and I love. There's definitely kind of a literary connection between this and Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, which is also obviously a very, very beautiful book, one of the most famous books of all time. And I love, though, the idea that there's an alchemy to it, that it's like you say, you can't just land there. It's a combination of realizing, being at the beginning of a journey, which means you're at the end of something else. It's the people you're around. It's the sharp focus everything around you starts to have on a pilgrimage. What else is in this alchemy that leads to these tipping points?
What else is in the alchemy? And it's obviously facing fears. You're dealing with personal fears. You're in a foreign country. You don't speak the language. You have to go to point to get your food. You could be robbed. You could be waylaid. You're in a foreign place. You don't know. You could fall and break your leg. People die doing these things. Blisters. Some people get so bad blisters they stop. But it's all a matter of step by step by step. It happens. That is the key.
And when you got to so past the tipping point, what happens people could read the book, but to you personally, what happened at the end?
Then all sorts of resolutions just happen. It's funny, when you let go, is when all things just start to happen and all the realizations come and just life just starts to work more.
Define let go. Use another phrase.
Forgiveness, for example, is a letting go, right? Saying yes to life and not fighting it, not resisting what's happening. I think that's a key theme in this book, and I've learned.
What does that mean? Saying yes to life.
It's actually something that a monk told me years ago, and I really layered that as a core theme in this book. I remember asking him, I was a bit of a wise ass, I think, but I really meant it. I was like, he just looks so calm and peaceful and so joyful. I was like, how do you find peace? Because his life was not easy. And I was like, how do you find peace? And he looked at me and goes, easy question, huh? And I'm like, if I'm going to ask you a question, that's the question. He said, okay, I'll tell you. He said, I say yes. To all that happens, I say yes. And that literally is a secret. Because I think so much of our pain, it comes from resisting what's happening. It's not giving in and saying, yay, okay, let me just... But it's like being in the moment, saying yes, and then coming from there, what do I want to do? That's a place of power.
It's interesting because I guess the other reflex to what's happening is to, let's say if it's a bad thing happening, is to either be angry about it, be regretful, or to blame others, or to complain about it. All of these things,
Saying no.
all these things actually do the same purpose of relieving the stress of the situation. If I can blame others, it relieves the stress of the situation. So if I'm upset about a car hitting me, I can say that guy's broke the law, I'm going to sue him. And then if somehow it makes you feel a little better about the situation. But if you say, yes, this happened, it allows you to actually just move past it and continue on your life.
You can still sue him. You
can still sue him.
Yeah. But it's ultimately it's your
but you
personal.
don't get bogged down in the regret and the pain.
Bingo, it's your inner self. Let's say, you have an accident and you could sit there lying. That's another thing I talk about in the book is like, you say, why this, why that, why me, why now, what, versus now what? This has happened. There's nothing I can do. Nothing I can do to change it. This has happened. Now what do I do? Now who do I become? That's where the freedom is.
So past the events of the novel, you come back home to the U.S. Did you feel like a changed person?
I was, and it was so hard to reconnect with people when I came back because you go from these, you come back and you lived a life in this short encapsulated period of time. Like you lived a whole life, like a whole hero's journey. I mean, Ultimate Pilgrimage is a hero's journey. It's a classic hero's journey. You lived your own personal hero's journey. You come back. It's like when I came back from boot camp and I was trying to like connect with my high school friends. I couldn't connect with them. You've lived through something. Guys who go to war come back, they have a hard time connecting with people who haven't. You're changed. Fundamentally, you're changed.
Like, what was an experience after you came back from this pilgrimage that you were out with, let's say an old friend, and he or she did something that you like no longer could connect with or relate to?
I remember I had less patience for small talk. Just complaining and all this other stuff, it's like you're just like why, this is a waste of my life, So
did you keep that feeling, or does it start to wear off?
All these things. I think then I was not smart enough to try to hang on to it, but what I was smart enough to do was try to write it down. We started my writing journey, which is what led to Love Yourself, which led to all of it, was actually walking that pilgrimage and trying to capture it so I could share it. Actually, I started to write it down because I wanted to share the experience with friends so they could understand. That's why I first started, right? But I think all these, if I kept a practice, if I created a practice, like a daily practice where I actually encapsulated some of the core principles and did them, I would have kept it. I've had to learn that later on, like with Loving Yourself, when I was like literally, it was a desperate attempt to save my own life or just or be gone, right? But I created a practice, and that practice saved my life, and I still do it. And when I do it, half-ass, my life is half-ass. When I do it full-on, my life is full-on. It's really that simple. When we create these lessons, these personal transformation lessons, and we create our own ritual, our own practice, our own consistency, that's when life sings.
Do you think it has to be like very personal, like your practice is yours and somebody else?
I mean, we can look at others and copy and see what works for us. Like your daily practice still is the very best thing I've ever come across. It really, really is. And I still tell people the internet was designed so you could write that one blog post, that one particular blog post you wrote about your first one about the daily practice. What was it? How to be the luckiest guy alive?
Yeah.
Right? That's why the internet was created. That practice, anyone can take it, and is broad enough and apply it to their life, create their own rituals, and it will transform their life. And I've seen it done for you. You've gone through personal bottoms, and you keep doing it. You keep doing it, and you rise. You always do, and you bounce back faster and faster.
I think that's the key, is that failure happens, and it's almost the speed of bounce back as you develop this practice, and it gets more and more incorporated into who you are as opposed to something you do.
And then I've also noticed in you have this almost faith in the practice because you've experienced the bouncing back enough times that no matter what happens, you will just continue the practice, and things will turn around really fast. I mean, I have seen it happen with you in front of my eyes.
Yeah, no, it's been, we've been through a roller coaster a few years.
But it's so inspiring because you actually, consistently it's doing it. That's all it is. And there's days, and the days you don't want to do it's the days where you must.
Right.
That's the thing, because when you're down is not when you want to be focusing on the good things, but that's when you must.
So tell me, like, now, you wrote this novel. This is the first, obviously it's a big goal. Was this like on your bucket list, write a novel? And
no, it wasn't a bucket list. I had a very important story to tell that I know. Look, I could have written these lessons in nonfiction.
Right.
But something like this, I know that if you tell a story and you share these lessons, they get layered into the reader, and the reader is better for it.
What do you mean by layered?
Because look, subconsciously, like how did human beings transmit knowledge from generation to generation? It was through storytelling, through before the written word, right?
So in other words, like by telling this story, some of the lessons happen while we're watching this character, as opposed to this character just simply lecturing us.
Yeah, no. I mean, exposition is the worst thing in fiction, right? You want to be layered in, and as he's growing, and the same lessons weaving in from other characters in other ways into the back, through different story arcs. You can't help but have those woven inside you by the time you're done reading this book. That was my core key goal for writing this book, this way of fiction, because I could have taken this, because I've had success as nonfiction, taken the lessons, I've written a nonfiction book, Your Personal Pilgrimage by Kamal, Ravikant, or whatever, But I think this story serves the reader way better.
I agree with you. And the very interesting thing you just said when you just gave a title of the nonfiction version of this, the title was in the second person, right? You use you, your whatever you said. This book is written, of course, in the first person. So we're along with you. We're the I in the book.
Yeah.
We're having personal struggles, and we're on the journey, and we experience what you're experiencing, as opposed to someone saying to me, you do this, you do that, which I find to be very annoying in the kind of literature of self-help, that it's all written in the second person, and you never know who the I is. And
that's also fear-based writing, honestly. You got to open yourself up fully if you do the I. Because the reader will sense it if you don't. So that's real writing. You do that very well.
Well, and you do it very well in this book. I mean, again, this is a great book. I really enjoyed. I've read it twice now.
Wow.
And actually 2.5 times, because I read what you initially sent me a link years ago to a much earlier draft. And I just think this is a beautiful book. I think it's the right stories. The characters are all fascinating. It's like each character is iconic of some other lesson that you have to learn. And I just highly recommend this. I think I'm going to predict right now this is going to be a best-selling book.
Thank you, James.
So Rebirth by Kamal Ravikant. I want to read some of the quotes actually on the book because they're great.
There's a great quote from you actually on the back of the book.
There is a great quote from me. This book transported me into an adventure I hope I never leave, which is true. I think the idea of a pilgrimage is so exciting to me. It's Luke Skywalker going to the Death Star and back. So it's Harry Potter going onto the train to Hogwarts for the first time. So, and then there's Ryan Holiday, who's a good friend of ours. He says, there is a line in this book: if you're on the road, you're a pilgrim. This is a beautiful, beautiful book for anyone who ever has or ever will make a journey inward or outward, which is a good distinction he made. Then Robin Sharma, who wrote the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, he wrote a profoundly valuable book that will help you rewire your deepest self so you lead your greatest life. And I think that word rewire is very important with rebirth.
Yeah.
Because you go on this pilgrimage and you strip your identity down to its basics as you begin this, and you do get rewired by all the things you see and the people you meet and the experiences you have with them and the things you say to each other. And it does become transforming, that rewiring.
Yeah. Personal transformation. And Cheryl Richardson also gave a beautiful quote. We both are big fans of hers, and she loves this book, which, it's amazing. Like people like, you, Cheryl, people I so love and admire when when you see my work and you love my work, it's like the best thing in the world. When you give your all to something and then people you respect actually love it, it's the best thing.
Well, I think Love Yourself was first of all, that was a great book. It's still a bestseller. What is it, 4 years later?
Yeah.
So it's still a bestseller on Amazon. It's obviously changing people's lives. I think this book will do the same. Rebirth. And look, congratulations on writing this novel.
Thanks, James.
I think this will do really well. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I love you. Thank you for having me. Second time.
Next time on the James Altucher Show.
I talk about Primo Levi in the book. I talk about how he describes when he came back from the Nazi death camps, how he is on the train having just been released with his fellow prisoners, and he feels a sense of relief and trauma and excitement that he's going back to his hometown. So the train pulls into the station, and his townspeople, who he hasn't seen for years, go to him and see him and his emaciated fellow travelers. And they say to Levi, "What has happened to you? What happened to you?" And Levi talks about how he starts to tell people of his experience. His words come tumbling out. And as he starts to tell people of his experience, they turn and walk away, unable to metabolize, unable to see, unable to hear what he has gone through. And he describes how, in many ways, this experience was even more traumatic than some of the experiences that he has in the death camp. Because our human need to be seen is so fundamental. And what he was experiencing in that moment was the opposite. So in Emotional Agility, and this comes to the writing, I talk about not only the need for others to see us, but for us to see ourselves.
And maybe that's the first step.
Correct. It's absolutely the first step. We so often live our lives in our heads, and we keep a safe distance from ourselves, from our hearts, from our needs, from our desires, from our emotions. We get up, we go to work each day, we put on a smile, we do our project. And what's really interesting is that keeping a safe distance doesn't keep us safe. Keeping a safe distance actually undermines our capacity to be resilient.
When did you get interested in this? Where along the way did you experience setbacks that drove you to this study?
Hey, thanks for listening. Listen, I have a big favor to ask you, and it'll only take 30 seconds or less, and it would mean a huge amount to me. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let the team I work with know. Please let my guests know. And you can do this easily by subscribing to the podcast. It's probably the biggest favor you could do for me right now, and it's really simple. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Again, it will only take you 30 seconds or less, and if you subscribe now, it will really help me out a lot. Thanks again.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.